Hello, is this the most amazing Mike Bell?
It most certainly is. Thank you for the nice introduction straight away. Hello, Dev.
Superb, it's an honor to talk to you, sir. And I think I'm just very, very grateful for your time and for you to call in. So you're a wizard in many arts. So could you please introduce yourself?
Of course, I'll go for it. No problem. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. So my name is Michael Bell, I suppose professionally known as Michael W. Bell. I'm the founder of Aurora Eclipse Productions, which is a music production collective, a studio and a label. I suppose I kind of started playing in sort of like heavy metal bands when I was a younger lad, and kind of when I went off to uni. When I was around about, it was quite late. It was about 22. I wanted to be a live sound engineer because the live world was, the live field was very much an interest to me. So I studied music production and then somehow found myself almost, becoming sort of possessed by film music. So I ended up kind of, I suppose I always was possessed by film music to a point. I always loved scores and films, but I ended up quickly getting into film music composition, and for my third year went on to kind of study music for film, and ended up almost kind of leaving the live spectrum, if you like, while I still work with bands. I kind of went out there and started finding films and pitching for projects and scoring films and media, basically.
Wow, wow, what an introduction. Wow.
Thank you.
It's all right. So was that band, can I pronounce it correctly? Is it I Kenny or I Senny?
Iceni,
sorry.
Iceni.
I see, yes.
So
Tell
the
me more about it.
Iceni were basically a tribe in old kind of pre-Roman Britain, which was reside in what is now is Suffolk, and their kind of leader, if you like, Boudica or Boudicca, was kind of famous for almost attacking Colchester or kind of Trunium, I believe it was attacked called at the time, which was the capital of England. So whereas a lot of bands in the kind of heavy metal sort of sphere and spectrum were kind of talking about the devil and all that sort of stuff, I suppose I seen these lyrics were more based on history, which I think was a little bit more. I mean, I'm doing my best to catch up on history. I think I've become more interested in it as I kind of got older. It was really the other guys kind of who were kind of writing the lyrical kind of side of it. But yeah, it was nice to kind of not be not be in the kind of like the satanic side of heavy metal, if you like.
Brilliant. I don't know how you did that. I don't know how you sidestepped it.
Absolutely. So yeah, that was. I never really wrote. I didn't really. I suppose I modified riffs and kind of started to kind of play around in terms of writing guitar riffs, but I never was a songwriter really back then. It was more kind of like I was on the fringes kind of thing of this scene back in Brighton, and I wanted to get involved in it, and I was just given the opportunity to kind of. I think I started playing bass badly, and then kind of just picked up the guitar, and a lot of the riffs were kind of. For anyone who kind of knows a little about kind of a performance, there were a lot of kind of what you call tremoloed riffs. So you basically hold a chord and trem it, what they call tremolo. So it's basically if you ever see like a cellist or a bassist, if you ever observe like an orchestral piece of music, where you'll see them kind of bowing the string really fast, so it's like a kind of sound. Kind of a fast vibrato sound that you get in metal. That's how they make those sounds. So I did a lot of that sort of chugging power riffs and tremoloing strings as fast as I possibly could.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
good fun.
The thing is, right, later on in the show I'll be playing Legacy of the Fallen. So
Okay.
I'll definitely be doing that. So can you tell me more about AEP?
AEP, sure. So AEP was a weird thing because I think while I kind of I get kind of I'm like an introverted extrovert, if that makes any sense. I spend a lot of time thinking and a lot of time contemplating, and I also spend a lot of time talking. But I think AEP started as like when I was at uni, and everyone was kind of in the room sort of being told to make blogs and make websites, and you saw all these kind of websites kind of coming up from like 32 people. And it was a mix of like, singer-songwriters, like singers, vocalists, producers, mixing, mastering. I mean, people wanted to do PR, people wanted to get into live stuff. It was just like a plethora of like talents that all these people were kind of getting into. And it kind of made me a bit sad because it was sort of all these voices kind of in the world. There were some truly great people, but they're all kind of like almost like whispering in the wind, if that makes sense. And I thought, look, why can't this just be done together? You know, what everyone's sort of, why can't it be like almost like a collective? So I suppose that's how that idea formed in my head. And Stephen Hope Weir, who I know you've had on before, of Skyquaker, are assigned to AEP. He has a very similar kind of way of thinking. You know, when we first met, we were talking a lot about kind of like almost agencies and how can we get all these creatives in one room. So I think AEP has gone through a few kind of rebrands and a few kind of models as it's kind of since its inception in 2013, where it started as kind of a way of me trying to license music, like for legal reasons. It's not really advisable for you to hold licenses as a person, and especially if you're holding licenses for another musician or a band, you can't do it as a sole trader. So you have to be an LTD. It has to be a company entity, which makes sense. So it started as almost like a firm which would try and license out music. So it would almost be like, I suppose, a music library, which I managed to develop in around 2014. But I spent so long kind of getting into web design and trying to kind of contact composers. I kind of wasn't writing myself. And we didn't have I mean, I think we had about 250 cues, music cues that could be licensed. But when you're looking at something like Audio Network or something like that, you know, they got 300,000. So it wasn't, I was kind of trying to jump before I could walk, if you know what I mean. And then it kind of went into like a house for kind of writing for trailer, and almost like a business place for me, like a backer house thing, which I was never happy with. And I think then since I've kind of tried to look at other bands and think, well, look, how can I help out? How can I advise? You know, I was always been kind of producing, mixing, mastering, and working with bands, and I was kind of advising them on how they could release their music and troubles they might have. And then I suppose it kind of started with RKS, he's a rapper based in Epsom, and I worked with him, but in the day job years ago. And he kind of said, look, let's collaborate, you know. And so we put out a single called Fireproof, which came out mid last year. And I think he's now moving on to a mixtape. We've kind of broken ties a little bit over the last kind of year, which has been a little bit sad. But then Skyquaker, of course, with Steve, I kind of was producing his song Queen Kong. And that kind of evolved into a conversation of like, well, let's release it. Yeah. Can AEP release it? So that's where I've kind of found myself now, coming back to the beginning of that conversation when I was back in uni wanting a collective. I feel like AEP now is a music production collective. I mean, yourself, Dav, you've contributed some great stuff to their track 5 Claw. You've done a great job, mate. You really, really have. And I mean, it's given me ideas of things I could work on with you. So I suppose it's that kind of thing. Like if someone in the collective needs a specific element, you know, as you rightly say, you could give them the desired effect.
I love it. That was good. That was really, really, really good. That's really that was good. Well, just before you called, I was playing. Is it RKS?
RKS, yeah.
Yeah, I was playing his track Fireproof, but I want to take you back in time, please, if that's okay.
Sure.
How did you end up doing the piece that you did for Shores of Acheron, End of Rain?
Shores of Acheron. Wow, you really have gone back into time on me, Dav.
I got it, man.
So Shores of Acheron, that was so I started doing kind of like, I suppose part of what I loved about film and video game music as well is those kind of really droney, soundscapey kind of just like, what sort of world am I in now? Almost like, you know, what would space sound like? I know space doesn't have a sound, but, you know, we have those kind of rumbles. And I think the film Gravity did really well at that, where you could almost hear sounds of things hitting the suits for anyone who's seen the film, but you didn't actually hear any outer elements. So Shores of Acheron was me kind of experimenting with doing kind of soundscapes. And at the time I was just sort of uploading them onto SoundCloud on my SoundCloud page. I don't know if they might still be there. I don't know. It was around the time as well of at uni, they kind of wanted us to look at business, and I kind of I did quite well in the business modules. I got on very well with the lecturer there, so I kind of started trying to put out the word that, you know, like I wanted to do a pitch for someone, and it seemed natural to me. Like I'd done a couple of short films, kind of student films to kind of get me going, but I wanted to kind of work with a band because I come from that metal kind of scene. So I think it was out on Twitter. I just kind of put it out there, like I wanted to do an intro track, guys, like a dark ambient intro track for someone's EP. And this band called Shores of Acheron from Baton Rouge in Louisiana contacted me, and that was my first paid gig 50
Wow.
quid.
Wow, 50 quid for all that hard work. That's mad.
50 quid. So, and as well, I suppose that was like on the boring side of it. That was the first sort of license agreement I wrote and we kind of signed, like, because I gave that to them exclusively. But yeah, that's out there on their EP, and they also were playing it on their live sets. And they kind of sent me a video. I think the guy Todd was his name, the guitarist, really cool guy, and he kind of sent me a YouTube video of it playing in this venue, and it sounded massive. I was like, Christ, I think the bass was a bit too loud on that, but they loved it.
Wow. So this may sound a bit weird, like the way we are in our community, like the Punjabi community. That first money you earn from your self-employment, you would keep that note. So do you still have the 50 quid note, or however it was done, or was it transferred, or we always keep our money, sort of thing, like the first money we ever earned from our business?
I kind of wish it might have brought me. I think that's a very good thing to live by. Or good luck. That's your first success. I don't think I did. I think I might have either paid for a compressor or pay. I would have invested it back into the business, so that's for sure. I didn't go down the pub with it. Yeah, I didn't keep it. But now you've said that, I kind of wish I had.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe I'll print because it was a PayPal payment. Maybe I'll print the receipt and frame that.
Superb. I gotta say something. At your end, the sonics are absolutely beautiful, so you can tell you're a great engineer.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
No, it's all right. Okay, what would you say your mission statement is for AEP?
So, I think the thing with music that kind of is really brings me into it, and I suppose all art to a point. But I think with music, what's interesting, and especially looking at music from a film point of view, is it really is a universal language. Like, I think while you'll have different nuances in different cultures, like I'm going to say this very lightly, I probably I spent a little bit of time looking into kind of Indian traditional classical music.
Wow.
Hindustani when I was at uni, so we had to do a fusion piece. And I really struggled with it because I didn't want to kind of, obviously, from Indian music where it's all about that tonic and the fifth, if you like, with the drone, and not too much melody. It was kind of like, well, if I start putting all this harmony into it, I feel like I'm kind of almost insulting the kind of eastern side. But if I don't put any melody in, I'm kind of insulting the western side. So it was really complicated track to put together. But I basically had like a tempura drone, which was continuous throughout the whole kind of track, and then sitars with Spanish guitars, and then kind of different percussion, hand claps, like finger cymbals, things like that, tablas, and then but with a Western string orchestra. So I might send that to you, Dav, because that might have. It's very amateur, mate. This was back at uni, But I suppose what I'm trying to say to answer your question, because I've backtracked slightly, to me, for Aurora, I just want to create the best music we can with the most amazing people as we can, and audition it to the world, really. I don't think I know Steve at Skyquaper is very much on that same page of we don't want to just be necessarily one thing, and it kind of causes you problems when you set out as a multi-genre company. So my mission statement, I suppose, is we are a multi-genre company that specializes in music production, but that it causes you issues in the sense of that, like, it's very hard to establish a fan base, because someone might come to the site, hear an Iceni song and think, oh Christ, what is this, or they might hear a soundtrack song and think, well, what's that? I was looking for some rock, or do you know what I'm trying to say? It's very difficult in that sense. So I've kind of, the mission statement is difficult in that way, because it does mean things get fragmented to a point from a label standpoint.
Yeah.
But I don't care. I think it's kind of it's what I love, and I think it's you could put everybody. I feel like in many ways can put their differences aside. If there's a piece of music playing, someone is going to appreciate an emotive from that piece of music, be it from any instrument. And if you spend a little bit of time trying to look into ragas, like I was doing at uni, and I realized that they're tied into different times of day and different kind of moods and different maybe social events, and then you start to understand some of the nuance behind kind of almost like the feeling in that piece.
Yes, Mike. Yes, you're right. You definitely very well researched on the rags. Very, very good.
I'm relatively researched, Dav. I mean, I don't want to come across like some sort of, I'm not as versed as I'd like to be, but it does very much fascinate me. Yes.
Superb. Can I ask you about Earlier on, I played the "Lurking in the Delta Wave" soundtrack, which was the Frankie Fraser documentary music that the soundtrack you made. 621,000 views for Silver Lining. So tell me more about that.
So okay, yeah, so that was an unexpected one. That's still growing. So Silver Lining happened quite early after I finished uni. So after I finished uni, a little bit sad. I broke up with my long-standing girlfriend, kind of lost my flat, moved to London to the family, and then thought, right, let's focus on the business. And I've kind of been doing that ever since, to be fair. But Silver Lining was a kind of like an indie film production company coming out of Eastbourne, and they were trying to create, I suppose, a similar thing to what Aurora is, but from a film point of view. And we were trying to I mean, really, the Mad Frankie Fraser thing was kind of trying to. It came out around the same sort of time that the Legends Cray Twins documentary did, with Tom Hardy. So we were, I suppose, they were trying to kind of get on the whole, making content about gangsters. It was a little bit jumping on the bandwagon, really. But that, I mean. A lot of these things have got a lot of history behind them. I mean, how many films has been made about the craze? I saw one years ago with like Martin Kemp, I believe in it, or a Spandau Ballet dude.
Oh wow.
Long time ago, So I think that came about really as I think the chap there, Louis Frost. The company unfortunately isn't operating anymore. They just another sad kind of like loads of passion and energy, but just very difficult to get it off the ground, budgets, etc. So yeah, Mad Frankie Fraser was really a documentary piece that he put together, wrote the script, if you like, and recorded the voiceover. And that was a bit of a stressful project because it seems to be a recurring theme now where you're not kind of given film. People they approach a film composer and kind of say, can you do me XYZ score? And they give you a brief, but you don't see any picture. And it can be quite tricky for me personally. I find that quite hard to do. So I wrote that in one night, 13 minutes of this droney kind of stuff, sent that off to him, and the rest history. It kind of just did really well, and it continues to do really well. So that's kind of the story behind that, really. I think he wanted to almost do like a documentary series that would cover like anything and everything, sort of thing, on like a weekly basis. That was kind of the model for that.
Wow. Can I ask a question, please, Mike?
Yep.
What sort of techniques would you have used? So you've not been given any visual and you just have to go with a brief? That's mad.
Yeah, it can be a one of my last video blogs. I kind of lightly touched on this because I did a lot of pitching. The last year, a lot of pitching for Hollywood trailers. So I suppose 2 years back, I did 2 pitches for the Jurassic World trailer. 13 Reasons Why, the Netflix series, The King trailer for Netflix, Doctor Sleep. I did like a whole sound effects kind of toolkit, again to no picture, and sent it off. Again, I'll come into the trailer stuff in a minute, but I think it's kind of with the Mad Frankie Fraser, I knew it was going to be black and white. I knew Frankie Fraser was not a particularly nice human being. So from a kind of sonic point of view, it didn't really matter if I got quite grimy, if you like, with the sounds. Yeah. So that I could sort of flex that darkness in me for that track, if you know what I mean. And I just knew it was going to be a long kind of trailer. So I think my approach to kind of Soundscapes is to almost get an organic element. So maybe like recording a washing machine, which naturally pitches up and down throughout its oscillations.
Dude, are you for real? You recorded a washing machine?
I recorded a washing machine, and then you time stretch that washing machine out to the length of time that you kind of want for your track. And what that does is it naturally provides like a something that pitches up and then pitches down. And then just throw a bunch of effects onto that, and then kind of work some synths in and distort them and fade them in, fade them out. It's very much a music production process. I wouldn't say composition necessarily comes into. I mean, you've always got a tonal center, but I would say that's definitely almost getting into like atonal soundscapes, designing that sort of stuff. For the Mad Frankie Fraser, but the trailer stuff, yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, sometimes you'll get a relatively detailed brief where they'll say, look, it's going to be this. I mean, sometimes you don't even get a length, which is very tricky. But sometimes they'll say, look, the first 20 seconds is like, we want this sparse music that hints at this with this type of mood, and then we want 30 seconds of build, and then another 30 seconds of what they'll call back end. So the back end, I suppose, would be you combining the opening and the middle section into a larger crescendo at the end.
Wow.
but it is tricky because there's loads of trailer houses, and it's very difficult for you to get, you know, in with an editor. They'll try and block that because obviously if I become good friends with an editor, they'll just come straight to me, and I'll probably be cheaper than going through one of these trailer houses. So you get a lot of companies pitching for the same trailer, normally about a year ahead of time, and you don't know if so you work for free, essentially, the pitch, and then you don't know if your cue's been placed until they literally place it.
Wow.
So it's a lot of, you have to kind of do the pitch and then just forget about it. But yeah, I would say that definitely, like I said in my video blog, I don't think I personally write very well not to picture.
Really?
No, I think I need the picture in a way. I think it gives me, for my film score stuff, I think I think it, you know, the grading of the images and the almost like the color palette of the film, because grading can affect things a lot. I've worked on projects where you've kind of almost finished the score, and then you know the colorist comes in and regrades the film, and suddenly your score doesn't work.
Wow. So you know,
there's a lot. Absolutely, it's quite a complex thing. So I mean, at the moment, I'm working on a short film called Hummingbird. I think that's a working title from my colleague Andrea Ratti. And he's actually, I've interviewed him yesterday. That's going out tomorrow on the AEP YouTube. And it's really cool, man. It's just like, you know, it's a lovely 15-minute sort of film, kind of Black Mirror-ish.
Yes.
And I'm really enjoying it, mate. It's great.
Oh, superb. So so your YouTube channel. So for people to find that, what would they type in?
So for the interviews I've been doing at the moment, I think actually Stephen Hope Wynn of Skyquaker's interview is airing now over at the Aurora Eclipse YouTube. But if you just go to the website www.AuroraEclipseProductions.com, you'll find all the kind of blog posts and the relevant links to myself and the guys.
Can I ask you a question about stress? How do you manage stress? I mean, there's deadlines and that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think the hardest thing that comes with stress is if you are also working a day job, which I do. So I've kind of floated in and out of a lot of the jobs I've done. I work on a way of that I can take hours or not take hours. So if I get busy, I can kind of reduce the hours that I'm having to do at the day job. If I then don't have any work, then I have to obviously up those hours. So it kind of is like a little bit of a creative gauge. That can be tricky because if the work dries up and you're working too much in a day job, you can get a bit down because you're not stroking that creative, you know, the creative juices are kind of halted. And I think if you're a creative, you need to create. Stress can definitely be a thing. I mean, I put out to the guys today, I mean, this film's got to be done by Sunday, this Sunday coming. So I kind of put a message out today that, look, I might go a bit quiet, guys. I'm probably only going to be around sort of for a couple of hours in the morning. I will get back to you, that kind of thing. I think it's something I've had to learn. I did used to get very stressed out. And if I didn't get a pitch, I could get quite depressed, to be honest. I took it quite personally. And I think that's just something that you have to learn as a person, that, you know, it's almost like the classic story of, you know, of the mate who's applied for like 20 jobs and he's not hearing anything. It's all a numbers game and you can't take it personally. So I think dealing with stress, I mean, I try to get out as much as I can, go for walks. I try to work out, or it's something I need to do more. To be honest, I'm not trying to say I'm a health fitness enthusiast, because I'm not, but I try to get a walk in. If I'm getting stressed and I'm feeling like I just can't do this and I'm starting to get angry, frustrated, I'll just go for a walk. You know, or even go for a nap for half an hour and then just come back to it, and you've normally got a fresher head.
Wow. What a great answer. Now, what's your favorite food and why?
Oh man, I love that you put this one in, because it's got, I'll tell you why, because and this is probably going to make me sound a bit mad, but if we think about what we do, say when we're producing music and we're working as like a mixer, or we're putting a band together and we're considering instruments, I kind of see food as the same thing. It's like food's like it's like a palette, isn't it, of different kind of ingredients that kind of all sing a different tune. They all got different tastes. So my mother, when she was pregnant with me, she had an addiction, I would say, to Indian food, which is definitely passed on to me. There's definitely a healthy stack of spices in my flat, and there has been pretty much consistently throughout my life.
Wow.
So I do enjoy my spice. I think there's something about the colours of spices that, as a youngster, was like, you're looking at the turmeric, you're looking at the garam masala, you're looking at that chili powder, you're like, wow, like what is this? You know, like And I think it's been interesting as well. Kind of like looking at Indian food, like chana masala. Okay, it's chickpeas, stuff like that. Like again, I'm not like a head of like Indian food, but I try. Do you know what I mean? I ask the chef, "What is this? What's your speciality?" So I think in my own cooking, I've definitely got a bit of a fusion approach to things. Like I have been kind of called out for putting chili and baked beans, or cooking kind of what did I do recently? I went to the family for a roast dinner and helped my mum with doing just carrots. And it was like a kind of like a garlic and sort of orange sauce she was doing. I ended up putting a bit of garam masala in there, kind of thing. And everyone loved it. They're fine. They're cool. I mean, but it's I definitely have a bit of a fusion approach. And I would say that Asian food. I'd like Thai food as well, Chinese food. But I think basically pretty much Indian and Thai would be the top of my of my food list. I mean, I like all food, but I like Italian food. But the carbs just don't really agree with me, unfortunately. Yeah. So if I've been getting a curry lately, it's been one roti, a tandoori,
I love it.
I don't know, maybe like we go for a paneer, get the cheese, and sort of stay away from the rice and the do you know what I mean? Yes. Which I love the rice, man. I love the keema naan or I don't know, man. I just have to try and stay away from the carbs,
Yes, I think with all this talk of Indian food, there's multiple orgasms happening over here.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. My delivery account's going to be active tonight, I think.
And I love the way you said roti. That's posh. It's like Kensington roti, but we. I love it.
Brilliant. I have been called out before. I mean, I used to call Ravi Shankar, and my mate was like, "No, it's Shankar." I was like, "Okay, mate, sorry, I apologise." A brilliant sitarist, by the way, amazing.
Of course, yeah, of course. Do you know? I was blessed over the last few years. Like I worked on The Crown for Netflix. I worked on I worked on Spider-Man, Morbius,
amazing.
Harlots, but that was a security stroke location stroke props. But I saw how the sound departments, how they worked. Because you mentioned earlier how people would try and get a direct line to the executives rather than going through the whoever it is the
middlemen. Yeah,
that's right. So I used to watch, and a lot of people didn't like the fact that I was getting on with because you mentioned Gravity. I used to work for Mr. Heyman.
Okay.
For Heyday Productions, which is he did Paddington, he did the Harry Potters. I used to look after the family scene and the house. So
amazing! I did not know that, mate. We learn things about each other all the time, don't we, Dav?
Yeah. It's proper cool. So, who inspires you and motivates you musically, huh?
Who inspires me? I think I would say that, I mean, this was a conversation that me and Steve had a couple of days ago, that I tend to find whenever I see another music, like I wouldn't say I was a good player, like I've been getting my guitar back out again after 10 years of sort of retirement. And obviously my main instrument that I'll use, I suppose, to write is a keyboard, really. But given that it's not really a keyboard, because if you're playing a trumpet, you're sort of trying to think of a trumpet player, how they play the trumpet, and then you're sort of hitting the key and then adjusting the note to get the performance right. So I think inspiration probably comes when it's in terms of like orchestral stuff. It comes really from players. I mean, it just blows my mind seeing someone who's literally. I mean, some of these guys start playing that instrument from like 2 or 3 years old. And it's been their whole life and their whole kind of like passion, their first love. And just I think to just have that dedication and that kind of relationship with your instrument, and then just know it inside out. That inspires me, and it inspires me to try and write interesting things that they could then play, or they could then help me to be better at writing it, or things like that. I think as people, the German film composer Hans Zimmer, who I'm sure everybody knows. I kind of, I mean, I think with Hans, it's a lot why he's been so successful. I think it is not, of course, he writes, in my opinion, great music, but I think it's his approach and his philosophy to how to how he approaches music and how he works with people. I mean, to kind of cut into what you said there with working on the productions and people didn't like you speaking to specific people.
Yeah.
You know, he made a great quote in one interview I saw with him last year where he was talking about that, you know, it's about balancing the ego faders.
Wow.
And I think that's very true in our industry. Really, there's that you get some people who are very kind of egocentric, I suppose, and that's fine. I mean, you need people like that really to put. I mean, if you look at Stanley Kubrick, you know, the guy was an absolute nightmare, but some of the work he produced is like it's going to be iconic forever.
Oh, yeah.
So. Yeah, I think Hans' approach maybe on his philosophy around music inspires me, but I think really, dude, it does come down to those players because without those, we haven't, you know, music dies.
Have you ever been in a situation where you know so I'm just guessing that you would have laid down stuff on the keys, and it just sounded so good that there's no point even calling the musicians in, or has that ever happened?
Yes, because the thing that unfortunately happens a lot in the film world now. I mean, if you take the Sherlock TV series, for instance, which was David Arnold and Michael Price who composed that. I was at a talk with Michael Price at the BFI in London, and I was astounded that, you know, the only thing in that score which was to be actually recorded was the strings, and they had a small string section at Abbey Road in room 1. And the rest was completely sampled. So I'm talking brass, I'm talking percussion, all the pianos. I mean, I think they have pianos at home, so they probably were recorded live. But, you know, to get a BBC funded kind of show as big as Sherlock and they're not paying a full orchestra, it's kind of worrying in that respect. So for me, yes, I mean, pretty much up to this point, really all the strings you hear and the brass you hear in my music has come from me rigorously programming sample libraries to play how I want them to play. It's only really when we get to kind of drums, guitars, singing, things like that, solo violinists, solo cellists, things like that. I haven't managed to just get the budget together just yet to, you know, to book an orchestra, which is my lifelong dream, really.
Wow. And you will achieve that, bro.
I'm taking all the energy. I'm honing this energy, Dav. I'm keeping it.
It's the pyramid behind me.
That's it.
Right. Now, have you all right, have you ever lost motivation or hit a hurdle?
All the time. I think it's part and parcel of it, man. I think it's you know, I watched a thing with I watch a lot of stuff. That's why I keep referencing all these things. I'm probably boring people to tears, but we'll try and be quick. No. You know, Junkie XL, who's Tom Hulkenberg, who started in the dance scene, and he's now a film composer in Hollywood, and he does a lot of stuff on his YouTube channel. And he was kind of saying that for him, he's only really creative for about 3 hours a day in the morning. So I think for me, I tend to have this kind of like, right, I need to do this film. I'm doing 16 hours a day now, which knackers you out. You get tired, you know, you don't kind of get the necessarily the best out of it, and you come back to it the next day and you're removing parts. So I think it's about avoiding burnout. You know, to try and keep the motivation that actually like I said earlier, taking that hour out to just go into another room, go for a walk, call your mum, do whatever you got to do, and then come back is useful. So I think hitting hurdles, yeah, I've had to innovate a lot. I spoke about the music production library, which was an expensive and a lot of time went into that, which ultimately unfortunately didn't come off. But it's not about, I think again, kind of like a philosophy that I've kind of tried to learn is, if I didn't go through that library creation, I wouldn't be up on contracts now. And it's like what I learned from it. It doesn't mean it can't be implemented in the future. So I think what a lot of people do is they hit a hurdle, they get down, and then they unfortunately we get kind of like, you know, downtrodden. And let's face it, the arts aren't the most supported industries in the world. So it can be difficult. You then have to start working. You have to go back to work, and then you're kind of not creating, and you end up in this rut. So yeah, I get hit and lose motivation all the time, man. And I just think it is just talk to people. You know, that you'll find a lot of people are go through similar things as you, and just you'll pick yourself back up and get to it in no time.
Oh wow. So me personally, myself, when I'm doing a lot of work, I would work in the so-called witching hour between midnight and 3 and all the rest of this stuff, and just to see where the moon is at its highest points and all the rest of this with the Oldic force of the moon and stuff. And I know this sounds a bit crazy.
Burning burning the midnight oil.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is. But I think any creative's biggest hurdle is writer's block, and I think you've addressed the solutions, and you've hit the nail on the head regarding going for a walk, and it's a good answer, bro. So
Thanks, man.
That's okay. Do you have family support in what you do?
Yes and no. I think if all of a sudden I was kind of like buying my second house or something, they might show slightly more interest in it. They'll ask to a point, but I think my family are very much kind of like I'm the first kind of like musical person really in my family, and I think because of that. Obviously, for instance, with Skyquaker Steve, a very musical background, very kind of very much ingrained in him. I think for me, a lot of my family have had very kind of traditional jobs, if you like. Yes. So I think the support is there and they're interested. But I suppose, sorry if someone is listening to this, it would be nice to have a little more support, I suppose, from a family point of view. My brother, my sister, my mum are amazing. They always listen to what I'm doing, and they'll share stuff. And I mean, my sister we did an Aurora Eclipse Christmas party, the first Christmas party. Wow. Last year, and my sister came, which was amazing. She's mingling, talking to the guys, and I really, really appreciated that. So I think yes, and I also think no. I think it's kind of like, I think sometimes in the back of their minds they may be like, "Come on, Mike, when are you going to get a proper job?" But I don't think they would say that to me. But no, I love my family, man. They're very supportive in other ways, which I suppose is, really, I think a lot of what I do completely goes over their head, and they'll like the final result and they'll be very interested in that. But I think the whole creation process, and I think what they see me go through is a little bit like it just out of their remit kind of thing, I suppose, and they just haven't maybe like spent the time to look into that more.
Yeah, I understand. Do you know the thing is, I think just you're making waves and doing very, very well, so just keep pushing.
That's the plan, dude. That's the plan.
I remember for me, I had a similar thing about the whole proper job thing, but then I hit BBC Introducing, and suddenly support came from everywhere. So, yeah. So it's just it's madness. Like you're working on big projects, and it's insane. You mentioned, tell you what, Five Claw. How on earth did you meet Steve in the first place?
Steve, yeah, I do love Steve. Steve came I was working for an Apple Premium reseller as a tech engineer. Because I am quite techie. I mean, I know me and you have had some long chats, about gear and stuff like that, and which I love, by the way. That's very cool. So I was working as an Apple tech, and one of the younger guys kind of came out the back and was like, looking a bit stressed. And there's this guy out there. He seems really stressed out, and he's talking about Pro Tools, and I don't know what he's talking about. It seems like your remit. So I come out, and there's Steve Wynn. And I think he was stressed because he had to deliver a voiceover pitch that he'd done. It was a paid pitch that he needed to deliver, and his Pro Tools session just wasn't running. So we spent about 3 hours in the store, just talking basically whilst trying to wait for things to download and trying to get his laptop up and running. We weren't successful because basically he needed to buy a new computer. But what that led to was me kind of networking with him, and I kind of went to his house and helped him kind of set up his new session. And then, before I was about to leave, he kind of said, "Well, can I buy you a beer?" And the rest history, really. We went for 2, 3, maybe 5 beers, and started talking kind of music, and I think he wasn't aware of kind of the things I necessarily did, and I wasn't too aware of everything that he kind of did, and I think, like I say, at that point we were talking, because he kind of was asking me similar questions to you of, what is Aurora Eclipse and what's your plans for the company and things like that. And I think that collective came up again, and he was kind of talking about trying to get people together for a monthly meet, in like the actors kind of circles and things like that. And would I come? And that was all kind of conversations from there. And then I kind of his Tangentized company, I did the audio branding for that. So I did I wrote him a score basically. So that was kind of some work we started doing, and then we were kind of working. He did a couple of tracks for a lady called Claire Estelle, where they were kind of co-producing songs, and then they basically needed, the session was huge. It was like 130 tracks for her track Somehow, and I think it was getting too big for a laptop, so they needed to come somewhere. So they hired me. So they kind of came and sat, and that was a bit nerve-wracking, really, because it's kind of, you're trying to mix someone's track, and it's all over the place. You know, anyone working in music production or anything, you know, if you work in Photoshop and you try and go to someone else's Photoshop composition, you're going to think, what on earth is going on with this? So I got Steve and Claire like sitting next to me in this tiny room where I was living. I was at home then, but with my mum, and before I moved out, and we're kind of mixing the track together, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, to be fair. I mean, I was fine because we were all talking and whatever else, but that came about. So there was the Somehow, which I then mastered for Claire, she released, and then there was a follow-up track to that, which again I mixed, mastered, sent it back to her, and then from there, kind of Steve, I think I was kind of getting a little bit wanting to get back into my own compositions, because I was, for quite a while, I've been kind of producing and like contributing, but not really composing. And I think around that time, Steve kind of said, look, Mike, I really want you to listen to these tracks. And I kind of said, Steve, look, I'm really busy, man. Like, you know, I'll try. I ended up listening to them, really liked the content that he had, kind of invited me down to the session for the drum recording session for Queen Kong at Echo 7 Studios in Epsom. I loved the track. I've really got on very well with the studio and the guys. Agreed to mix the track, agreed to master it. The rest history, man. Is now I'm releasing it, working with them quite closely. So yeah, it all started from a Pro Tools issue in an Apple store.
Oh my life, that story's nuts. But didn't you find Steve such a warm individual, isn't he, as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It's so knowledgeable and kind of you know. I mean, his energy in some ways is like, you know, you can't help but kind of you know, stand up. Yeah. You know, yeah, absolutely, so helpful and really kind of passionate about everything he does. I mean, the whole family are just amazing. You know, I get on really well with them all. And I think that there's been Steve's been very kind of helpful from an AEP point of view as well, because I think because of that energy and kind of. Really, it's been me and him that have brought all these people together and kind of started this up. So I'm always going to be very thankful for Steve for that.
Oh wow! Do you know something? Tell me a funny studio or live performance story, bro.
Okay, so it's probably going to be a studio one.
Cool.
And this has only ever happened to me once, but you know, a little earlier on we spoke about kind of like balancing the ego faders. Yeah. And you sometimes get that one guy in the band. It can be a vocalist or a bassist or a guitarist. It's normally a guitarist, I hate to say. And they want, all they're kind of listening to is their guitar. And you're trying to obviously consider, you know, a full release and you're trying to produce the track, you know, and so you're obviously their guitar is, you know, unless it's a solo, it's not as loud as the vocalist and things like that. Do you know what I mean? And this guy just kept again full of energy. He was a lovely guy. I'm not going to name him, but he was a lovely guy. He's full of energy. And he just every session he just kept coming in. Oh, can we make the guitars louder? Can we make the guitars louder? And you could see the band members like tutting and sort of like walking out and getting a bit upset. So I called break, you know, and because that's the thing I think producing. That's one thing I say about being a producer. I think, you know, you've got to keep people happy and you've got to kind of consider when people are getting upset and you've got to try and almost keep people together. It's quite a hard job, really. Yeah. Anyway, I called break. You know, the guys kind of went off in their separate ways, came back and I had a little bit of a laugh with them. But what I'd done in the meantime is I'd literally just rewritten on the desk where his guitar part was on a fader that was inactive. So the fader didn't control anything. And I just kind of said, look, dude, I know you're really struggling with this guitar part. Like, and I get it. And, you know, do you mind just moving the fader to where you kind of think the guitar should sit? And he looked really happy and whatever else. And he kind of comes up and he's moving the fader and he starts smiling. He's saying, yeah, I think that's great. And like, obviously it made no difference at all to the session because the fader was inactive. But essentially it's, you know, I suppose that's a funny story, but it's just, I don't really understand that how even moving a fader that did nothing, it made me think this really just is a bit of an ego thing.
It is psychological.
Psychological thing that, he had his mark on his guitar, and the guys were like, the band were laughing because they knew kind of what I'd done. But hey, that was, you know, that got released as well through that. That wasn't through me. That was years ago. But they did quite well with that as well. So Yeah, that always will stick with me. That story, it did amuse me at the time.
Brilliant story, dude. That is actually hilarious. It's quite good, and I may use that one day myself. You
Yeah,
know,
we've all been there, right?
yeah. So tell me, any favorite plugin or hardware or mix master bus, anything you like in the studio that you particularly love?
So I think I've always had a bit of a one of the things that's kind of, I think it plagues most of us in the audio world. I know me and you have had chats separately about this, but we're kind of always fighting to keep our computers from crashing, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing. So I think one of the things is that the whole Logic Pro Tools. I'd say Pro Tools is my favorite DAW. But it frustrates me sometimes, and then I go back to Logic because I think there's amazing things in Logic that Pro Tools doesn't have.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, there's one EP I produced by a band called Black Noir back in 2016, and all the drums in that are Logic's drummer. And it sounds incredible. People are saying, "Oh, the drums sound great. Who drummed on it?" And I'm like, Logic's drummer. So it's kind of like Logic's got a lot of cool built-in stuff into it. And I think if you're starting out, or you happen to find yourself in a situation where you perhaps can't afford all these high-end libraries and whatever else, which a lot of us are like that a lot. Logic's a wicked tool because it's got everything in it. But I would say Pro Tools I was the nutter back in uni, composing film scores in Pro Tools. I write film scores in Pro Tools, which is just unheard of.
Yeah.
So Pro Tools definitely, but from a plugin point of view, I'm loving the Slate Digital stuff.
Oh wow. Wow.
It's you can subscribe to it. It's literally $15 a month, and you get all their plugins for free. Talking about like a master bus, you can put their virtual rack on that master bus, and you can almost build your own rack within that. And it's just incredible. Really great sounding compressors, awesome limiters, and kind of really creative tools as well, like air EQs that perhaps don't mess so much with the dynamics in an EQ. They'll just knock it down whilst compressing it slightly within a field. So that's really cool, man. Their air EQ. Slate Digital's wicked. I always used the old T-Rax 3 metering plugin.
Yes.
So I'm not even on T-Rax 5. I'm using 3. But that metering plugin has been on the master bus of every track I've done to make sure that I'm not out of phase, and that, checking the RMS levels and looking we're not peaking, and just looking at the spectrum, of course. I would say that, yeah, so I reckon the reason I went with Slate Digital was because I ended up with so many plugins at one point, and you kind of install these like trial packs. You end up with 50 plugins in your system. Then they want you to buy them. And I thought, oh, well, I really liked that plugin, but it's like 500 quid. I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy that. It's too expensive right now. So Slate just gave me kind of like, I thought, right, I'll commit to this. It's $15 a month. It's 12 quid a month, and I get everything in it. And whenever they release a new plugin, you get it. So Slate's definitely worth checking out. I'd say that in terms of hardware is something that I kind of want to get more of. I really would like to get some sort of like actual hardware synth.
Yeah.
For my more soundscape stuff that I can actually sit down and play with. And I kind of, in a way, the reason I want to do that is to kind of, it sounds strange, but to take me away from the computer a bit.
Yeah. I know.
I think a lot of people, we get too attached to our computers, and actually it'd be nice just to turn on a synth and play.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if anyone wants to send me a recommendation, or if you have a recommendation yourself, Dav, of like a relatively inexpensive kind of outboard synth,
dude,
I will investigate it.
I was looking at recently, as of late, it was the Novation Peak.
Okay.
Very, very good. I looked at the Rev 2. But I ended up buying the Korg Pro Log 16.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's behind me, and it's just a 16 voice analog. I work on an old, trusty Korg M3 with a Radius expansion board, and that is absolutely beautiful. That expansion board is worth its weight in gold. It's DSP modeling there of analog, but do you know the whole thing regarding true analog versus digital? Do you know something?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think it kind of, you know, I tell you where you can really hear it, and this is a thing. People can shout me down for this, but I truly believe this is a thing.
Yeah.
If you listen to something that's been produced digitally and then press the vinyl, and then you listen to something that's been recorded analogically and press the vinyl, and then you go and listen to it on a player, you'll hear the difference. There's definitely a clear difference in the separation. And the kind of it's almost like I feel like you get an extra like 5 or 10% maybe in each band somehow when it's true analog.
Wow.
So yeah, I get the whole you know, the whole way that obviously digital steps things down into samples. So I understand the whole issue there with your binaries and your noughts and ones causing issues. I mean, everything I've really done has been, I suppose, when I was at uni, that was using that's quite a cool story actually. That was Brian Eno's old Audient desk.
For real?
Yeah. That's what I learned on. Fabulous console and really cool routing, like the most comprehensive routing options I've seen on an analog desk ever. But you know, so that would have been all analog. But then of course, you know, you're recording it into Pro Tools as your tape, so you lose that in a sense. I think you keep maybe some of the characteristics in terms of the timbre, but you lose because it still goes down to tape. So I know there's still some analog studios about, and bands will specifically go to them for that. But yeah, I think if I had an analog synth, I think I'd just be able to get more rasp into those trailer tracks. More kind of amplitude and get a bit more dirty and aggressive in terms of those kind of like. So look, remember a lot of these trailers and a lot of modern film scores now, they're pumped full of synth.
Yes,
because right. The sound effects are so loud that if you've got an action film, you know, the score kind of loses power. So I spoke about RMS, which is your kind of almost like your perception of how much load is in the sound wave is going through the cables essentially. So if you've got a big action film and you're trying to kind of really get that low bass line, you know, I mean, you can hear it all the time in Hans Zimmer stuff and the action films he's done. It's pumped with synth.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll look into that, man. I think an analog synth is definitely next on my buy list.
Well, I think for a sound designer point of view, I think definitely I love the Prologue. I think the Peak is one I was definitely going to pick up for that. And what I was going to ask you is, do you experiment with the whole, you know, stereo miking, decatry, and all the rest of that funny stuff?
Yes, I have some stereo mics that sound very interesting. Especially if you put them on kind of acoustic guitars, or even just recording, like when I did the Dr. Sleep sound effects toolkit, I recorded like the chalkboards in stereo to try and add some weird interest into basically they were going to place these sounds throughout the campaign, a bit like with Stephen King's It, where you heard that, anyone who's into that horror stuff, you heard this like clown laugh in all the promotional stuff. It was supposed to be for that. So yes, I've experimented with it. I know that both myself, Steve, and Rick at Iceni are very interested in kind of binaural recordings, and I actually found my sister sent me like this new technology. I can't remember what it's called now, but they basically moving songs around your head, and it's almost like you're listening to this piece of music with your brain, not your ears. I had to take my headphones out because I thought my speakers were like playing really loud. It was about 3 a.m. I thought, oh no, I'm gonna, you know, and it's quite incredible, this technology, how you get real depth and like it's just bizarre. I can't really explain it, and I don't fully understand how understand the concepts behind like binaurals. But yeah, that's something incredible. And decatries, yeah, I mean, of course, like anytime really, anytime I'm considering an orchestral piece of music, you'll often get the microphone positions in the sample library. So you'll get your kind of tree, if it's like Spitfire Audio's libraries, which are all recorded at Air in London.
Wow.
You'll get sometimes like balcony mics, you'll get kind of surround mics, closed mics, then your tree mics. So I suppose it's intrinsic really to any kind of sample library. And I think if I was to go and record any sort of players, like if it was just three string players in a room, a little kind of chamber, I still would use a tree, I think. Yeah.
Oh wow, because the reason why I learned about the whole tree thing, bro, is back in the day when I was a young man, I picked up my first set of outboard preamps, and they were the Dav Electronics, and I got them from was it Robin Bigwood who used to write for Sound and Sound Digital Performer section?
Yeah.
So I met Robin, and his wife was singing at a church that day, so I picked him up. And I was driving this lovely old M5, and he kept talking about the car, and I kept asking about the freeze. So,
Brilliant. Brilliant.
But he said to me, right, he told me about Mick Hinton, and the whole Decca sound, and I then went to meet Mick, so I wanted to get some servicing done on the pre's, and he sorted them out, and he made a lot of stuff for Gilmore. And he serviced a lot of the Neve consoles, and it's interesting meeting Mick of Dav Electronics based in Twickenham.
Okay.
Really cool man. A lot of handmade bespoke gear. You know, that was quite nice meeting him. So regarding, it was 8. That's what it was. Because earlier on, I saw on the chat, it was it's 8D. I listened to Billie Eilish.
8D, that's it.
That's the one, bro. And I was shocked. I've got a set of DT 150s on my head now, and I was just like, what the hell have I done? It's mad.
It's just incredible, isn't it? It's just like, what on earth is this? And then of course Steve went mad, you know, and my mate Rick's like, what? How do we do this? Because he wants to do that, and you start thinking, I mean, how you'd meeting those guys is amazing, man. I'm very jealous. I don't want to move past the you know, those guys like did a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? It'd be like meeting Joe Meek.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're damn right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But like, that is just. I mean, I kind of want to look at how that's done, because there could be a real niche in like actually creating music and doing an 8D mix. But how you do an 8D mix? I mean, I gather you'd have to do it to headphones. But it starts to make you think, you know, already we've got Dolby Atmos in the cinemas, and even my new iPhone, it sounds. I went camping in the Lake District on my own, just decided to go and get cabin fever for 4 days, sort of thing.
Beautiful.
And I was watching films on my iPhone, and I'm like, this sounds incredible. Like, I thought, how on earth have they done this? It's a device. I'm watching like Taken 2 or some, a real dad film kind of thing, and just the sound is just, I thought, what's that? And then I realized it's got Dolby Atmos tech in it in the phone. Wow. So we're already seeing Dolby kind of like, not that Dolby died, but I think Dolby for a while just became like they just existed, didn't they, kind of thing. Whereas I feel like for me, I've really got excited about Dolby Atmos, and you're seeing cinemas with subs in the ceiling and 49 speakers like across the whole ceiling. So it really does travel. But that 8D stuff is something else. I mean, if you could, I don't know how it would work in terms of a cinema application or even a music application, because I gather everyone would have to use headphones unless you had a room that was specifically treated with speakers. But I think that tech needs headphones.
Definitely, it just sounded awesome. You mentioned earlier on about computer game audio. So did you do the whole WWISE thing?
Wise, no. I mean, a lot of the guys at uni who were kind of looking to go down that route did, and I moved off onto the composition course and left production. And if I'd stayed on production, which actually latterly I wish I had done, they were using things like Max FSP to kind of generate their own instruments, if you like, to feed into things to make game sounds. Wow. And I think Wise, I mean, I went to a talk in a South Bank where they were talking about video game music, and I think one of the first kind of games from my recollection that actually had an orchestra in it was a James Bond game on the PlayStation. And the guy there was talking about, really, if you couldn't just be a composer, you had to be a programmer as well. And I think that side of it, for some reason at the time, sort of turned me off to the whole game thing, because I was using a Mac, and Wise you can only get on Windows, and I didn't want to go and have to buy, or I didn't want to start running boot camp, or I just didn't want to. I was more interested in getting into like, how do I actually record kind of thing. But now, latterly, kind of moving forward 10 years, I'm sort of, it does interest me, and that talk as well, that game music talk, Screened Music put it on, it was great. And they were talking about this one chap of almost like generative game music, because it's talking a lot about AI, which is AI is a bit of it's a dirty word to producers and composers, because we feel like it's sort of going to replace us. But I think if it's used in the way he was describing, where I can't remember the game, but to briefly run you through it, was that there was a character who's basically in a hospital in a coma, and you're in her subconscious, and you're kind of trying to bring her out of this coma. And there's a violinist playing in the street outside the hospital. And kind of from what I could gather from what he was saying in the demo he gave, that not only does the game actually, it has sample libraries in it and composes music on the fly as you're playing the game. Yeah. So everyone's playing the game gets a different score. And that changes depending on how you work. But things like that violin that's playing outside and can be audible in kind of the real world, if you like, in the conscious world, that kind of feeds its way into the score as well, and you start to hear it louder when you're kind of getting further through the game. Wow. And that I found quite, I mean, that wouldn't be Wise. That would be some other new kind of fangled thing that they're now using. But yeah, I'm aware of Wise, and I kind of a lot of the people I follow and sort of talk to are working in the games industry, and obviously games like Mass Effect were huge at pushing kind of really great music and bringing composers like Clint Mansell in, onto that game as well. Game music's a big thing.
Very, yeah, it is, isn't it? The thing is, Mike.
Yep.
I thought we lost the line then.
No, I'm still here, mate.
Cool, bro. Listen, you mentioned on that chat, like, regarding, did you try and use like 2 computers together before?
Yeah. Vienna Ensemble Pro. Vienna Ensemble Pro is a wonderful piece of software that comes from a German company called Vienna Instruments, or VSL. And they started really, they make really great sounding orchestral libraries themselves. They are, I would say, very orchestral in the sense of that a lot of the libraries I used have kind of been, I suppose, because of the halls they're recorded in, they've got that cinematic edge. I mean, a lot of Zimmer's music and a lot of Hollywood's music is recorded at Air in London. So if you're recording samples in Air, it's going to have that sound, right? Whereas VSL, definitely, I would say, if you're working in more like contemporary classical, or you don't want that kind of almost like that's not to say you couldn't record a score at Air, but it's just going to have that sound, you know. So VSL samples are great, but they also did a product called Vienna Ensemble Pro, which I suppose you could think of it as, when we look back to the old, I think they call them digi-racks back in the day, actual like hardware samplers.
Wow. Yes.
You know, and composers would kind of had like 48 of these things like in their studios, cost absolutely thousands and thousands of pounds, you know, just to run their samples. Well, VE Pro kind of does the same thing. It's just not hardware. It's what you do is the first thing that's great about it is you can use Mac or PC. So it means that if you've got an aging Mac, like mine's going to end up being in about 2 years, and, you know, looking at your business account, you're thinking, Christ, I can't afford a new Mac, which is pretty much all of us, I think. Yeah. You can attach a Windows computer, which is obviously going to be cheaper, purely to run your samples, but then you can still work in Logic, you can still work in Pro Tools on your Mac. So Vienna Ensemble, what it kind of does is it basically sends audio, it sends MIDI over LAN. So you connect the computers via Ethernet, and it sends the MIDI information through the plugin to the other computer on the receiver plugin, if you like, which is then connected to a sample library. Then the audio is then sent back over LAN again into your hosting DAW. So it means that if you've got, I mean, at the time when I implemented Vienna Ensemble Pro, I was working on a short film called Blanket, and the session was getting, that was about 30 minutes of music in one session. It was getting quite big, the template, and it just kept crashing, and I couldn't run it. So I bought a Mac Mini at the time, a second-hand Mac Mini, I think, you know, 200-300 quid, and I put basically my string libraries on it. And kind of then routed all that audio back into the system, which freed up more room for kind of mixing and adding pianos and things like that. And it basically enabled me to complete the score. Move forward 2 years, I bought a secondhand like the Cylinder Mac Pro, the old 2013 trash can Mac, they call it.
Yeah. Nice machine.
I was still, then I sold the Mac Mini, and my old like cheese grater Mac Pro 2010, which I still have, that became effectively what the Mac Mini was. So I was still using that setup, but just lately I'm just finding the problem I think with it was the template I had was huge. I mean, it had about 350 tracks in it before I'd even written a note. And it was very complicated. Like, you know, I had to kind of turn on 2 computers, and then, you know, the network here is a bit weird. Like in the flat I'm living in at the moment, I have to use power line adapters, if anyone knows what they are. there's no routed Ethernet, and now my flatmate's also does a lot of creative stuff, so he's kind of using the line as well, and I was getting some latency and some issues with it. So my current setup, which I'm currently kind of talking about on my YouTube channel, I've gone back to basics, if you like, and I'm not using VE Pro at the moment. I'm just using Pro Tools again, with a kind of cut down template, and back to using samplers on multi-tracks, basically.
Wow.
But that's not to say that VE Pro won't be used. The second I get, what I might do is kind of almost put my legacy plugins on the older Mac, because I still use old sample libraries. There's nothing wrong with them, but keep my kind of main system for kind of like the current like top end libraries, and obviously the Slate packages like the T-Rex plugins, or Ozone, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I suppose the nerd side of me came out there big time, and I remember because I started doing these videos on YouTube about the setup, and they got quite a lot of views. People seemed quite interested in it, and I went to I was feeling a bit delicate. Well, I think it was an early morning talk in London again. It was about 10 in the morning. Feeling a bit delicate kind of thing. I'm definitely a night person like you, Dav. Thanks. And this guy kind of said, "Are you Mike?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, from YouTube, Mike." I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." What he said, like the VE Pro guy. I'm like, "Yeah," and it kind of freaked me out. And I sort of, as soon as the talk was finished, I went home. I thought I probably should have stuck around, but I would have done now. I suppose I definitely was feeling a little delicate. But yeah, people were watching those videos, and I think that's the whole studio setup stuff, and kind of like I suppose it comes back to when I met Steve. Like, I enjoy kind of helping people out in that way. Do you know what I mean? And talking about setups and rigs and it's quite a dark art, really, isn't it?
Dark art, is certainly. I love it. I love it. You're running such sessions which are so big. So may I then ask the question? Are you running at like 24-bit and 48K for film work, or?
So in terms of studio work, in terms of like Skyquaker, for instance, yes.
Yes.
In terms of if I was to deliver a cue, then yeah, it would have to be 2448. But I let you into a little secret, Dav. It wasn't necessarily recorded in that. I've unfortunately had to upscale it so the studios accept it. A lot of us do that.
Oh, wow.
Purely because the sample libraries you're using are often in 1644.1.
Oh wow.
So, there's no point in you making your session
bigger than
you're just going to be constantly resampling it. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I'd say, though, kind of talking about the trailer world. I mean, a lot of the time I was quite astounded. It's like, Logan, the film Logan that came out.
Yeah.
And there was a Super Bowl advert for that in the States. I mean, and I know the Super Bowl is huge in America. I know that. And the advert for that, the music they did for that, they had to do in an hour and a half. And it was literally like a drone, from a sample library, some kind of building strings, and then a girl singing into a MacBook microphone.
Oh my God! Wow.
And it makes you think, wow. So that definitely wasn't recorded. I mean, even if it was recorded in like 2448, who the hell cares? And it's kind of, the world's moved a little bit like that in the digital world. I think there's been a couple of cues where I kind of like didn't upscale it, and then they came back and said, "Mike, what's going on? Can you send us a higher res one?" But the industry seems a bit, especially maybe things are just moving so fast now that sometimes that in a way goes out the window, which I don't think is a good thing at all, because you're diminishing quality. And I think there's whole argument for that. The whole smartphone, people like listening to music on their smartphone speakers or their laptop speakers. Really, all that great work we're doing as engineers is kind of going out the window, and it's sad. So yeah, my sessions, if I was to get you around to perform vocals or to record you playing, it would definitely be in high scaling, but or high resolution even. But I think a lot of my sessions, in terms of like, if I'm doing like a if the library is in that, if the specific library is in can deal with that that resolution, I'll do it. But most of the time, I'm in 16.
Wow. Cool, bro. Because I think, and what do you make of Pro Tools for MIDI work?
Well, you see, it's a strange thing because I think the first DAW I used was Adobe Audition, and I didn't really understand it. I just, I knew what I was obsessed by a church reverb. I was obsessed by reverb, and I was playing just sort of dirty guitar riffs in and sort of putting loads of reverb on them and smiling at myself. Really, was the start. Pro Tools MIDI, I get on very well with it. I think. I don't know why, because I think why it was is before I went to uni, because I didn't really have any kind of like knowledge of how to do anything. It made me feel uncomfortable, so I kind of bought Pro Tools ahead of time, and I bought like a training pack of like basically just videos and then sample sessions, so you could almost open the session like, and then the guy would be talking you through what was going on in that session in terms of how he set it up.
Yeah.
So I suppose I felt quite comfortable with Pro Tools going into uni, and then they started talking about Logic, and I thought, oh, okay. And I didn't know Logic. I had it, but I hadn't really used it. Logic, I think I prefer using Logic for more soundscape stuff. I just think the tools in there, like putting reverses on things, and like I spoke about with the Frankie Fraser lurking in the delta waves, that was in Logic. Maritime Discoveries, which is another kind of dark ambient track, that was in Logic. I think the MIDI in Logic is potentially better, but that's not to say that Pro Tools can't do the same job. And really, a lot of that entire score for Blanket was all in Pro Tools. Really, the majority of my songs are in Pro Tools. They're using MIDI in Pro Tools, so you still get the piano roll window. I use 3 screens in my studio, so I'll often bring up the actual piano roll full screen in the middle for me as I'm writing, and I've kind of got the mixer one side, and normally the film, if I'm working to film, or various mixing and mastering kind of stuff in the other screen. So yeah, I personally don't have an issue with MIDI in Pro Tools. I think they've developed it more and more as they've moved on. And now the whole collaborative part of Pro Tools that they're bringing in, where you can, me and you could be working on a session live, and you'd kind of see that I changed something and download my changes, and I love that. I think that could be a really cool thing for AEP in the future. Like, given that we're all going quite collaborative, it's something that's on my list to investigate. So I think really my argument really has been, it's like the whole Mac versus Windows argument, or the Pro Tools versus Logic versus Cubase versus Ableton, argument. I think it's what you're used to and what you're comfortable in. I think that they both. There's things in Pro Tools which I love in the workflow, but then I feel like I wish you had this part that Logic's got, and vice versa. So I don't think there's a perfect DAW. I think just whatever kind of is making the sounds that is speaking to you, and then latterly speaking to your audience, that's the one you should go with.
Superb. Because the reason why I asked that question was 'cause I think back in my day when I was a youngster, there was the whole Pro Tools rig, but everyone generally felt the consensus was that it was so butt ugly, but in the early 2000s, that they used Logic as a front end for the Pro Tools hardware. See, so we learnt the early, and we're talking eMagic. You know what I mean? Not.
Oh right, okay, you're going right back. Okay.
Yeah. So that was very, very old school. See, that's why I had to ask about the MIDI. I guess I'll have to put the money down for for Pro Tools, because working with you guys as of late, I think that caused some hurdles with me and Steve, because I'm a new Endo guy, see. So that was
oh, so you're using Endo. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I did want to move across to Cubase, and Endo was a bit out of my price range, I think, when I was looking at it at the time, and I kind of like you did an amazing job, because I remember I got a phone call from Steve, and he's like, I think we got some timing issues, and can you look at the session, and is there a way I can kind of like, can we, and I was like, well, can you do an OMF, can you, there was that whole kind of conversation, and Ben, this guy quick guitarist, is also in that kind of like, he uses Logic, and he's like, should I get Pro Tools? And I'm kind of like, yes, because you write in ridiculous time signatures. So, but I think I don't know. Part of me kind of longs to be a Steinberg user. I used a trial of it and I loved it. I thought it looked amazing. It had folders in it, Dav.
Exactly.
which is coming to Pro Tools though this year.
Yeah, true.
Folder stacks, amazing. And I like the way that it kind of almost the way it draws the MIDI as you play it in Cubase. It was satisfying in terms of the UI.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it was pretty ugly Pro Tools, wasn't it? Brilliant.
But yeah, and we've also got the ADR panel, see the dedicated ADR panel, which is handy. But I got a discount, see, because I ran the old Cubase, which I paid 425 quid. I think it was version 5 or SX support, and then we upgraded, and then to jump from SX to version 5 straight to Nuendo 10.
Big leap.
Yeah, definitely, man, massive leap. But it was.
Yeah.
I think I paid about 400 and something odd quid, 388 quid for that jump. But I'm not saying whatever works for you, because you're kicking ass, and that's what it is. Like we interviewed a guy about 4 or 5 weeks back called Nutty P, and this guy still uses Cubase 5 and he's kicking ass in the music side. He's a dangerous producer. So
It's incredible, isn't it? It really is. I mean, I know people that do that. They'll buy a system, they'll buy whatever's current, they'll invest a lot of money, and then they'll say, "I'm not touching that for 10 years." And they're still producing stuff. You're like, "How? I've just upgraded mine. I'm like 2-3 grand deep, and how come your song sounds better than mine?" They're like, "Well, I know it inside out."
Exactly.
So I think it's absolutely. I mean, if you're working on a 4-track, or programming something on an Amiga, I mean, it doesn't matter, does it really?
Very true. Very, very, very true. And I think that's what I'm going to be picking up soon is an Atari ST.
Okay.
So and I'll just see how that is with the old RISC processor. I think because they had 0 latency on the RISC processors. Okay, so we touched on it earlier because the question was any interesting studio gear on a purchase list. There's analog synth and anything else?
Analog synth definitely on that list. Do you know? It's a weird one because it doesn't really come into like the music realm, I suppose. But I've got basically a 32-inch Samsung television in front of me as my main monitor.
Cool.
And it looks terrible, Dav.
Oh.
And like I want to kind of upscale it, and I think because my sessions are so big, if I can put it into like 4K or even 2K, up from 1080, it will give me more space to see things a bit clearer.
Yeah.
So I know that's a bit of a boring, non-tasty one for your for the audience here, but a new monitor is definitely on my list because it's this 12 years old now and it's looking a bit pixelated. That's on my list. Definitely the analog synth. I think I would like to buy a new microphone, a new condenser. I don't know. Just I kind of want to get into recording players again. Yeah. And while we know, like we work a lot at Echo 7 in Epsom, with George McFarlane's an amazing producer there, and Nikki, the studio owner, is great. But sometimes it's like, and especially during lockdown now, where we can't go to the studio, I can't even really get anyone round to the house. But It just would be nice to own like an amazingly sounding, like really I'm using like the SE Electronics S1.
Yes.
Which is, to be fair, for a cheap mic, it does sound good.
It does sound good. Yeah.
Right now I'm talking into like a Rode boom mic, I suppose, like a shotgun.
Lovely sound.
And which I use basically for that and really for my kind of blogging stuff. Then I've got those stereo mics that I mentioned earlier. They're condenser and they do sound quite nice. But yeah, it'd be nice to get like just a great sounding mic, so that I'm not sure whether it's going to happen this year. It was on my list in January, but the world's gone a bit crazy since then. It was on my list to really, I wanted to write a piece of music, especially with a violinist in mind, and get them to basically record that part, and then I'll delete my MIDI.
Yes.
And I wanted to do it here. So that was, the microphone was kind of part of that conversation, but it looks like that might be pushed to next year.
I was looking at a microphone, and it's called the Sontronics Aria, I think. I thought that's quite interesting.
I'll make a note.
That's okay, bro. All good. And this one I'm talking through now at the moment, this is a Rode K2, but I've modified it. I've pulled out the valve and put a Nos Mullard in that. And behind me, we've got a SE Electronics Gemini.
Okay.
That's quite nice, not nice too. But then again, it's also about, I'd imagine that if you marry it to the right preamp as well. But so, I think I'll just have to get soldering, I guess, and pick up some.
To try and that is really cool though that you do that. I really do. I think that's amazing. Opening up gear and modifying it into something that's kind of like unique to you is amazing. That is just cool, man.
Thank you. I think every Thai Indian man in the world is just saluting you.
He's just making microphones. This is making microphones. I love it. I mean, talking of preamps.
Yeah.
Because and coming back to the Slate Digital stuff.
Yeah.
That's another really cool thing they do. They've modelled pre's. Now I know it's digital modelling, but you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how great I've had stuff sound when I put that plugin on. But it's never going to match a proper hardware pre, of course. But yeah, that is maybe something to look into. Maybe get the trial at some point and check it out. See what results you get.
I think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna because I'm not knocking any other brand, but certain other brands have cost me a lot of money over the years. And
using Waves, yeah.
No, Universal Audio. But the sound phenomenal, but it's costly. It's like an elephant with a coke habit. It's not good. So it's just. But
that's brilliant.
Brilliant, bro. Okay, so what can we expect from you this year, please, Mike?
Okay, so I kind of put it out to the parish today, if you like, that I'm going a little bit in QR, non-contactable, I suppose, until Sunday, because I have a deadline for a short film which needs to be finished in terms of like a very conclusive, complete first draft by this Sunday. So I suppose you can expect. I'll need to talk to the director and the producer whether they let me release the score. Probably be a SoundCloud release rather than an official release, but we'll see. It might be an EP. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. It might have to. Obviously, the festivals have been put off, so I don't know what's kind of lots of disruption there in terms of what's happening with that film. But yeah, there'll be a short film coming out, which I am currently scoring. I have been kind of wanting to do this concept album focused around sleep. And there's a lot of science and a lot of crazy kind of research I've done into it. But the idea is that I'm still kind of like massaging my thought process, if you like. It probably will be a multi-album project. And one will kind of be focused around, I suppose, the Brian Eno sleep phases that we go through, and it'll be very peaceful and sort of meditative and harmonious. Then there'll be one which will be the absolute polar opposite, proper sleep paralysis, like real issues sleeping, not nice, proper dark ambient, and maybe one in between. I don't quite know. And there's been a whole bunch of recordings that I've gathered from everyone, really, in terms of vocals and little bits of instruments and things like that. But that got put on a little bit on hold while I was doing the Skyquaker stuff. So that's going to be coming. At least one of those albums will be this year. So that's going to again go down, I suppose, that lurking in the delta waves kind of route, but a little bit different, a little bit better produced, I think, a little bit more clarity in things. And kind of, I suppose, I did that track about 5-6 years ago, so I've learned a lot since then. So yeah, there's going to be an album there, and I think just trying to build Aurora Eclipse. Sometimes it can look like Michael Bell himself as the composer is quiet, but then you look at what Aurora Eclipse are doing and you look, oh, okay, he's not quiet at all. Continuing to build AEP, and just keep kind of going, trying to build my YouTube, trying to kind of keep the audiences coming in there. I've got a lot of really cool supporters on there that have been there almost since day one. Even when I have gone quiet, they're still there, and I appreciate that. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be my year, I think.
Superb, bro. I think if you're gonna, I think to research sleep then could lead to the dream world, and I thought a great resource there would have been there's a book behind me called Alchemy and Psychoanalysis by Herbert Silberer.
And psychoanalysis?
Yeah, definitely very good, because Freud wouldn't accept his theory, so he ended up hanging himself. But his work was phenomenal. So I have that book here. That could be of a great benefit.
I've made a note, and it's interesting you should say that, because I've been reading a lot of Jung.
Oh, brilliant.
And they fell out, didn't they, Freud and Jung?
Of course,
yeah. And it seems kind of like because I think we're going to get into something crazy here. I'm going to keep this brief, but I think Jung was supposed to be almost like the protege of Jung, of Freud. And that didn't happen because they disagreed. So it seemed to be a thing. But yeah, I've been reading a lot. I mean, Freud, I haven't quite gotten onto yet. But I'll read that Alchemy and Psychoanalysis. And yeah, I read a lot of Carl Jung. I do like Carl Jung.
Oh, brilliant. So the whole archetypes thing, isn't it, with Jung? It's just absolutely super.
Absolutely. And you read it and you think, oh yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant.
it's quite deep. I sometimes found myself kind of like, what on earth am I reading? You know, and especially when it, like, there's a lot of it was audiobooks as well. And I was sort of trying to drive my car and listen to this kind of like, you know, far more intelligent content than me kind of thing. And I'm gonna have to listen to this at home, you know.
I think you're an amazing individual and a real visionary. So could you please tell everyone about the websites and the contact links?
Sure. Well, I thank you, Dave. Honestly, because you know it's these sort of conversations, to be honest, that drive me, and they also help me organise my thoughts. And I love having a chat about all sorts of different things. So thank you for having me on here as a start. And yourself as well. I think you know the things you do and the history. I know there's a whole bunch of history with you that I'm yet to know, and we probably need to meet, you know, and actually have a conversation face to face. Where I hope that a lot of that will come through.
Yes, bro. Yes, of course.
In terms of links, so you can find me at michaelwbell.co.uk. You can find the company at AuroraEclipseProductions.com. I suppose maybe they're the easiest places to go, but I'm also on Twitter at MWBellMusic. The company is AProd UK. They're good places to start, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not on Facebook, but I'm pretty much everywhere else. So that's a good place to start. I've been putting out loads of blogs. There's one I put out about you, Dav, yesterday.
Wow.
So this will be obviously talked about as well. So yeah, try and check out. You know, for any listeners here, RadiAsian, you know, there's lots of stuff going on, and I think there's going to be, you know, some really interesting fusion stuff. I mean, Dav's going to knock us out the park when we finally get around to Five Claw.
Oh man, you're too nice, dude. Honestly.
Absolutely.
You are a lovely soul, and thank you for your wisdom and the insight into your world, which is phenomenal. The way you manage to balance everything. I think at this point, a few weeks ago, I was at a point in my life where it was the classic Hans Zimmer quotes, which was it was between a mini Moog and a car, I think. And yeah, and it still doesn't drive. So I picked up the Prologue. It was between that and an old 7 Series and E38. So I picked up the Korg. So it's been a real pleasure having you on my humble show, and to have such a great personality and a great talent. And at RadiAsian, we'll go to the end of the earth to support you and Aurora Eclipse.
I really appreciate it. And I know the guys do as well, mate. I know they're all kind of like, everyone's singing each other's praises, which is great. Yeah. You know, I think that's I know on the list here that there's kind of, I suppose, like anything else I perhaps wanted to add, and I suppose that is,
yes, there is.
That is kind of one thing I suppose I would say is that obviously I'm very humbled by you know, by what you've said and what Steve's saying, things like that, but really none of this is possible without the guys. It's all kind of I don't want this to go back to just me kind of in the studio on my own. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of you know, everyone talking and kind of building these kind of friendships and relationships is paramount to everybody moving forward. Very you know, so I suppose that's my kind of closing thought is that yes, there's a lot going on. You're about to hear, you know, Legacy of the Fallen by Asini, which is an extreme metal song, but you know, you'll find then some kind of fusion stuff or some soundtrack stuff or some rock or some punk or some indie or some folk. It really is going. Well, you wait till you hear Five Claw. I mean, it's going it's going all over the place, man. Brilliant.
So, would I say you've just introduced us Legacy of the Fallen?
I would say that's probably what's happened. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for calling in, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me, Dav.
A pleasure.
Look after yourself, mate.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.